Laura Bennett never thought she would die on an alien planet. She was just an engineer, fixing machines and keeping systems running. But now her escape pod was falling through purple clouds, alarms screaming in her ears, and the ground was coming up fast. The crash was brutal. Metal screamed and trees broke as the pod tore through the forest canopy. When everything finally stopped moving, Laura hung upside down in her straps, blood dripping from a cut on her forehead. Her hands shook as she released the harness and fell onto what used to be the ceiling. She kicked the emergency door 3 times before it opened. Fresh air rushed in, sweet and clean. Laura crawled out onto soft purple moss and just lay there for a moment, staring up at a sky that was the wrong color. 2 small moons hung overhead, and the sun was too orange. This was not Earth, this was Kepler 442b, and she was alone. Her emergency pack had survived the crash. Laura checked the contents with trembling fingers. 3 days of food bars that tasted like cardboard, a water filter, a small medical kit, a knife that looked too small to be useful, a scanner that would run out of power in 2 days, and a beacon that should signal other survivors except when she turned it on. All she heard was static. The ship was gone. The colony mission had failed before it even started. Now Laura had to survive long enough to be rescued. Assuming anyone else survived the evacuation, she spent the first hour just sitting by the pod, trying to make sense of what happened. The forest around her was beautiful in a strange way. The trees had silver bark that seemed to glow in the fading light. The leaves were blue-green and made soft chiming sounds when the wind blew through them. Strange birds, or maybe insects, called to each other in the branches above. As the sun set, Laura heard other sounds, deeper sounds. Something large was moving through the forest, breaking branches as it walked. Her scanner lit up with a heat signature that made her breath catch. Whatever was out there was huge, maybe the size of a truck. And it was coming closer. Laura scrambled back into the pod and sealed the door. She sat in the darkness, listening to heavy footsteps circle her crash site. The creature sniffed at the pod, its breath fogging the small window. Laura pressed herself against the far wall, not even breathing. After what felt like hours, the footsteps moved away. She did not sleep that night. When morning came, Laura knew she could not stay in the pod. The power was dying and she needed water. Her scanner showed a stream about 3 kilometers northeast. She had to go there or die of thirst. Laura packed everything she could carry and stepped out into the alien forest. The morning was cool and mist hung between the trees like ghosts. She marked her path carefully, cutting small notches in the silver bark every 50 meters. Getting lost would be a death sentence. The forest was alive with movement. Small creatures that looked like 6-legged squirrels ran up and down the trees. Something that might have been a bird but had 4 wings instead of 2 flew overhead. The scanner kept pinging with life signs all around her. This place was full of animals, and Laura had no idea which ones were dangerous. She had walked for maybe an hour when she first heard it. A soft rustling behind her, like something moving through the underbrush. Laura stopped and listened. The rustling stopped too. She started walking again. The rustling followed. Something was tracking her. Laura's hand moved slowly to the knife on her belt. She wanted to run, wanted to scream, but she forced herself to keep walking at the same steady pace. Running would make her prey. Her instructors back on Earth had drilled that into her head during survival training. Predators chase things that run. The rustling got closer. Whatever was following her was getting braver. Laura could feel eyes on her back, watching her every move. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. She reached a clearing where a fallen tree lay across a small ravine. Laura stopped there and slowly pulled out her scanner, pretending to check her position. The screen showed a heat signature about 20 meters behind her. Medium-sized, maybe 40 kilograms. A predator based on the movement pattern, but not a huge one. Not an adult. Probably young. That gave Laura an idea. She set down her pack and started picking up pieces of deadwood from around the clearing. She needed firewood anyway, and this would let her move around and see what was following her. She bent down to pick up a branch. The rustling got closer. 15 meters now. Laura picked up another branch. The creature moved again. 10 meters. It was stalking her like a cat stalks a mouse. Getting ready to pounce. She could almost feel its muscles tensing for the attack. She spun around fast, dropping into a crouch, and let out a growl that came from somewhere deep in her chest. It was not a human sound. It was pure animal. The sound a predator makes when it is done being patient. The sound that says back off or else. The creature froze. Laura got her first good look at it. It was about the size of a large dog, covered in dark blue fur with black stripes along its sides. It had 6 legs arranged in pairs, and a broad head with forward-facing eyes. A hunter's eyes. But right now those eyes were wide with surprise. It was a cub. A baby predator that had been following her out of curiosity or maybe hunger, but definitely not smart enough to know when it was outmatched. They stared at each other for a long moment. Laura kept her body language aggressive, shoulders squared, making herself look as big and dangerous as possible. The cub's ears flattened against its skull, its body lowered slightly, submissive. It had recognized her as dominant. Laura gathered the rest of her firewood, never taking her eyes off the cub. It sat there watching her with that strange tilted head that animals do when they are trying to understand something. When she picked up her pack and started walking again, she heard the soft rustling resume behind her. The cub was still following, but now it kept its distance, staying a respectful 20 meters back. Laura smiled despite herself. She had just made first contact with alien life by growling at it like an angry bear. The scientists back home would never believe this. As she walked toward the stream, Laura could hear the soft padding of 6 paws in the leaves behind her. The sound should have scared her, but somehow it did not. The cub was following her the way a young dog follows its owner, curious but cautious, interested but not threatening. Laura had made an impression. Now she just had to figure out what to do about her new shadow. Part 2. 3 days passed since Laura first growled at the cub. 3 strange days of learning to live in an alien forest with a predator watching her every move. The cub never came close, but it never left either. It was always there, a shadow in the trees, a rustle in the bushes, a pair of eyes watching from the darkness. Laura found the stream and set up camp nearby. The water was clean according to her scanner, and there was a natural shelter formed by massive tree roots that curved over like a roof. She built a fire pit using rocks from the stream, and made walls out of branches and her emergency blanket. It was not much, but it was home. The cub watched her work. It sat about 10 meters away, hidden in the ferns, but Laura could see its dark fur and the gleam of its eyes. Sometimes it would tilt its head when she did something interesting, like it was trying to understand why humans did such strange things. On the second day, Laura started talking to it. She knew it probably could not understand her words, but talking made her feel less alone. The silence of the forest was heavy, broken only by alien bird calls and the whisper of wind through strange leaves. "I am going to call you Blue," she said, while gathering more firewood, "because of your fur. Is that okay with you?" The cub just stared at her. "I will take that as a yes," Laura continued. "So, Blue, what do you think my chances are of getting rescued?" "I am thinking maybe 50-50. The beacon is still not working right, but someone must be looking for survivors." Blue tilted his head. His ears, which were small and round, twitched forward like he was actually listening. Laura found herself looking forward to these one-sided conversations. Blue was a good listener, even if he was also probably thinking about eating her. But he never tried. He just watched and followed and occasionally made a soft chirping sound that seemed almost friendly. On the 3rd day, Laura got brave. She caught a small rabbit-like creature in one of her snares. The scanner said it was safe to eat, so she cleaned it and cooked it over her fire. The smell made her mouth water. Real food, not cardboard food bars. Blue appeared at the edge of the firelight, closer than he had ever come before. His nose was working, sniffing the air. His eyes were locked on the cooking meat. Laura cut off a piece and held it up. "Want some?" Blue crept forward 1 step, then stopped. His whole body was tense, torn between hunger and caution. Laura tossed the meat toward him. It landed about halfway between them. Blue darted forward, grabbed it, and retreated back to his safe distance. He swallowed it in 1 gulp. "Good?" Laura asked. Blue made that chirping sound again. Laura laughed. It felt good to laugh. She cooked another piece and ate it herself, savoring every bite. Then she tossed Blue another piece. This time he did not retreat as far. They shared the meal in comfortable silence, hunter and human, both far from home. That night, Laura heard something that made her blood freeze. A deep roaring sound that echoed through the forest like thunder. It was not close, maybe a kilometer away, but it was loud enough to shake leaves from the trees. The sound spoke of size and power and hunger. Blue appeared next to her shelter, pressing close to the entrance. He was making a low whining sound, and his ears were flat against his head. He was scared. "What is that?" Laura whispered. Blue looked at her, then looked back toward where the roar had come from. He chirped softly, urgently. Laura did not need a translation. That sound meant danger, big danger. She added more wood to the fire, making it burn brighter. Fire scared most animals, at least it did on Earth. She hoped it worked the same way here. Blue stayed close all night just outside her shelter. Every time Laura dozed off, she would wake to find him still there, keeping watch. By morning, he was gone. Laura felt a strange pang of disappointment. She had gotten used to having him around. But he was a wild animal, not a pet. Of course he would leave eventually. She went about her morning routine, checking her snares and filtering more water. The beacon still was not picking up any signals. Laura tried not to think about what that might mean. Maybe the other survivors were too far away. Maybe their beacons were broken too. Maybe she was the only one left. She was walking back to camp with her water bottles when she heard it again, that deep roaring, but much closer now. Close enough that she could hear the crash of something large pushing through the undergrowth. Laura ran. She did not think, just ran, her survival instincts screaming at her to move. She burst into her camp and grabbed a burning branch from her fire, just as the creature emerged from the trees. It was huge, easily 3 meters long and built like a tank. The same blue-gray fur as Blue but covered in scars. The same 6-legged body but much more muscular. The same predator eyes but filled with cold calculation. This was an adult of Blue's species, and it was hunting. The creature's eyes locked onto Laura. It lowered its head and took a step forward, lips pulling back to show teeth as long as her fingers. A rumbling growl came from its chest. Laura held up the burning branch and screamed. It was not a human scream. It was the same primal growl she had used on Blue, but louder, angrier, more desperate. She made herself as big as possible, waving the fire, showing this monster that she would fight. The adult hesitated. Fire was clearly something it did not like, but it was hungry and Laura was meat. It took another step forward. Then Blue came out of nowhere. The cub was tiny compared to the adult, barely a quarter of its size. But he launched himself at the larger predator without hesitation, going straight for its legs. He bit and clawed and made a high-pitched shrieking sound that was part warning and part battle cry. The adult snarled and tried to shake Blue off. Blue dodged and came back again, moving too fast for the bigger predator to catch. Laura joined in, swinging her burning branch and screaming at the top of her lungs. She grabbed her knife with her other hand and planted her feet. She would not go down easy. Neither would Blue. The adult looked between them, calculating. 2 opponents, one with fire and weapons, one fast and annoying. The math did not add up in its favor. With a final roar of frustration, it backed away slowly, then turned and crashed back into the forest. Laura stood there shaking, adrenaline flooding through her body. Blue trotted back to her, and for the first time he came right up to her side. He was panting hard, his fur standing on end, but he pressed against her leg like he needed to make sure she was real. Without thinking, Laura reached down and touched his head. His fur was softer than she expected, warm under her palm. Blue leaned into her hand and made a soft rumbling sound, almost like a purr. "You saved my life," Laura whispered. "You crazy little beast, you saved my life." Blue looked up at her with those alien eyes, and Laura saw something there that transcended species. Trust, loyalty, pack. They were not human and alien anymore. They were something more. They were a team. Part 3. After the attack, everything changed between Laura and Blue. The cub no longer kept his distance. He slept at the entrance to her shelter every night, his body blocking anything that might try to get in. During the day, he walked beside her when she went foraging or checking her traps. Sometimes he would wander off to hunt on his own, but he always came back. Laura found herself talking to him more. She told him about Earth, about cities with millions of people, about oceans that stretched to the horizon, about her family who must think she was dead. Blue would listen with that tilted head and occasionally make soft chirping sounds like he was responding. "I had a dog once," Laura said one morning while cleaning fish from the stream. "His name was Duke, big German shepherd. He used to sleep at the foot of my bed just like you sleep at my door. I wonder if you two would have been friends." Blue chirped and moved closer to sniff the fish. Laura tossed him one. He caught it mid-air and swallowed it whole. She laughed. "Not exactly table manners, but I will let it slide." The days fell into a pattern. Wake up at dawn when Blue started moving around. Check the beacon, which still only gave back static. Have breakfast, usually fish or the rabbit-like creatures that Blue was surprisingly good at catching. Gather firewood and maintain the camp. In the afternoon, Laura would explore the area around her shelter, always with Blue at her side. She marked trees and made a mental map of her surroundings. In the evening, they would sit by the fire together. Blue had gotten comfortable enough that he now lay right next to Laura, close enough that she could feel the heat from his body. Sometimes she would scratch behind his ears and he would make that rumbling purr sound. It was the most relaxed she had felt since the crash. On the 8th day, Blue started acting strange. He was restless, pacing around the camp and making anxious chirping sounds. His ears kept swiveling toward the south like he was hearing something Laura could not. "What is it, boy?" Laura asked. "What do you hear?" Blue ran to the edge of camp and looked back at her, then toward the south, then back at her again. The message was clear. Something was coming. Something important. Laura grabbed her knife and a half-burned branch from the fire. If it was another adult predator, she wanted to be ready. But Blue did not seem scared. He seemed excited, almost happy. His tail, which Laura had only recently realized he had, was wagging. Then she heard it too. Voices. Human voices calling out in the distance. "Hello? Anyone out there? This is Rescue Team 7 calling any survivors." Laura's heart jumped into her throat. Rescue, they had found her. "Here," she shouted back. "I am here." "By the stream!" Blue barked, a sharp sound that carried through the trees. Within minutes, 4 people in rescue gear emerged from the forest. The man in front, a tall guy with gray hair and captain's insignia, stopped dead when he saw Laura's camp. More specifically, when he saw Blue. "Bennett?" the captain said carefully. "Laura Bennett, is that you?" "Captain Morrison," Laura replied, recognizing him from the ship. "Yes, it is me. And before you say anything, that is Blue. He is with me." The other 3 rescue team members had their hands on their weapons. One woman with red hair was staring at Blue like he was a bomb about to explode. Blue growled softly, not liking the attention or the fear smell coming from the strangers. "Ma'am, you need to step away from that creature," Morrison said. "Slowly." "No," Laura said firmly. "Lower your weapons. Blue is not dangerous." "That is a juvenile apex predator," the red-haired woman said. "We have reports of these things attacking survey teams. Adults attack. Blue is not an adult, and he saved my life 3 days ago when an adult tried to kill me." Laura put her hand on Blue's head. He leaned against her leg, still growling at the strangers. "We have a deal, him and me. Pack rules." Morrison stared at her for a long moment. Laura could see him trying to decide if she had gone crazy from isolation. She probably looked crazy, she realized. Hair tangled, clothes torn and dirty, standing in a makeshift camp defending an alien predator. "We found tracks," one of the other team members said quietly. "Big ones, adults, all around this area. But none of them came into the camp." "Because Blue warned them off," Laura explained. "He patrols at night. He keeps me safe and I keep him safe. That is how packs work." Morrison took a deep breath and seemed to make a decision. "The main colony base is 15 kilometers south. We have most of the survivors there. But Laura, I need to know, are you coming back with us?" Laura looked down at Blue. The cub looked back up at her with those expressive eyes. She thought about leaving him here alone, thought about what would happen to a young predator without a pack. The adults would kill him or drive him away. He had chosen to protect her instead of finding his own kind. She could not abandon him now. "Yes," she said, "but Blue comes with me. Both of us or neither of us." "That is not going to go over well with the security team," Morrison said. "Then the security team can deal with it," Laura replied. "I am still a chief engineer, right? That gives me some authority. And Blue is not a pet. He is my research partner. If we are going to survive on this planet, we need to understand these creatures, not just shoot them on sight." The red-haired woman, whose name tag said Price, stepped forward. "I am Helen Price, Xenobiology. I would love to study him. If Chief Bennett says he is safe, I believe her. She has survived 8 days in hostile territory with that creature. That is proof enough for me." Morrison looked at his team, then at Laura and Blue, then sighed. "This is going to be one hell of a report. Fine, he comes with us. But if he shows any aggression, any at all, we take measures." "Understood?" "Understood," Laura agreed. "Thank you, Captain." The walk back to the colony base took most of the day. Blue stayed close to Laura, suspicious of the other humans but not aggressive. The team kept their distance, which Blue seemed to appreciate. Laura could tell he was nervous. There were too many strange smells, too many unknown people. She kept her hand on his head as they walked, letting him know she was there. When they finally reached the base, Laura was shocked by what she saw. It was a full settlement. Dozens of prefab buildings arranged in a defensive circle, walls made of local materials reinforced with metal from the crashed ship. Guard towers at each corner, hundreds of people moving around doing various jobs. They had built a town in 8 days. The arrival of Laura and Blue caused quite a stir. People stopped what they were doing to stare. Some looked curious. Some looked terrified. One little girl pointed and said, "Mommy, look, a space puppy." Laura had to smile at that. Space puppy, that was one way to describe him. They were taken to the command building where Governor Lisa Chen was waiting. Chen was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She looked at Blue for a long moment, then at Laura. "Chief Bennett," she said, "I am very glad you are alive, but we need to discuss your companion." "His name is Blue," Laura said. "And yes, ma'am, we do need to discuss him, along with the rest of his species, because if we are going to make this colony work, we need to learn to coexist with the native life." "Blue proves it is possible," Chen nodded slowly. "I am not opposed to the idea, but it will take convincing. Commander Jennings from security already wants the creature destroyed. Then we will convince him," Laura said firmly. Blue chirped softly beside her. Together, for the first time since the crash, Laura felt hopeful. They had survived the wilderness. Now they just had to survive politics. She looked down at Blue, who looked back up at her with complete trust. They had faced down a 3-meter predator together. A few nervous bureaucrats should be no problem. Part 4. The meeting with the Colony Council happened 2 days after Laura arrived at the base. Those 2 days were spent in a small prefab housing unit with Blue, essentially under house arrest while the leadership decided what to do. Laura did not mind. She needed the rest, and Blue needed time to adjust to being around so many humans. The housing unit was basic but comfortable. A bed, a small bathroom, a kitchenette with actual hot food. Luxury compared to sleeping on the ground. Blue explored every corner, sniffing everything, marking the space as his territory. He was not happy about being inside, but he tolerated it because Laura was there. People came to visit. Dr. Helen Price came first, bringing scanning equipment and notebooks full of questions. She spent hours observing Blue, taking measurements, recording his sounds. Blue tolerated her because Laura said it was okay, but he never let Price get too close. Only Laura could touch him. "Remarkable," Price kept saying. "The intelligence level is much higher than we thought. Look at how he responds to your commands. Look at that emotional awareness. He knows you are stressed about the meeting tomorrow and he is trying to comfort you." Laura looked down at Blue, who had his head on her lap and was making soft rumbling sounds. Price was right. Blue did seem to sense her moods. When she was anxious, he stayed close. When she was relaxed, he wandered around exploring. It was like having a very large, very alien therapy dog. "What are his chances?" Laura asked. "At the meeting." "Be honest." Price's expression turned serious. "Honestly? 50-50. Governor Chen is open-minded. Dr. Philip Kent from the medical team is cautious but willing to listen. Commander Jennings from security wants Blue put down immediately. The others will follow whoever makes the best argument." "Then I better make a damn good argument," Laura said. The next morning, Laura dressed in clean clothes for the first time in over a week. Someone had salvaged her belongings from the ship's storage, so she had her uniform. She brushed her hair and tried to look professional. Blue watched the whole process with tilted head, clearly confused about why humans did such strange things. "Wish me luck, boy," Laura said, scratching his ears. "You have to stay here during the meeting. I know you will not like it, but I need you to be good." "Can you do that?" Blue chirped softly. Laura chose to believe that meant yes. The council chamber was in the largest prefab building in the center of the colony. 6 people sat around a table. Governor Chen at the head, Commander Jennings, a thick-necked man with suspicious eyes, Dr. Price, Dr. Kent, an older man with kind eyes and gray beard, Engineer Jack Murphy, who had worked with Laura on the ship, and Lisa's assistant, a young woman named Kelly whose job was to take notes. Laura stood at the end of the table feeling like she was on trial. In a way, she was. Blue's life depended on what happened in this room. "Chief Bennett," Governor Chen began, "thank you for coming. We need to discuss the creature you brought into our colony." "Blue," Laura corrected gently. "His name is Blue, ma'am," Jennings snorted. "It is an animal. A dangerous predator that has no business inside our walls." "Blue saved my life," Laura said calmly. "An adult of his species attacked me. Blue, who was just a cub, put himself between me and death. He had no reason to do that except loyalty. Does that sound like a mindless animal to you, Commander? It sounds like pack behavior, Jennings replied. The creature imprinted on you because you were the first thing it saw. That does not make it safe. Actually, Dr. Price interrupted, that is not quite accurate. I have been studying Blue for 2 days now. His behavior suggests much more than simple imprinting. He shows problem-solving abilities, emotional awareness, and social intelligence. He responds to verbal commands and body language. He even seems to understand when Chief Bennett is upset and tries to comfort her. So it is a smart animal, Jennings said. Smart animals are more dangerous, not less. Laura took a deep breath. Blue is not just smart. He is capable of forming cross-species bonds based on mutual respect and protection. That is rare even on Earth. Only a few species can do it, dogs, dolphins, some primates. It suggests a level of intelligence we need to respect. What exactly are you proposing? Governor Chen asked. I am proposing we use Blue as a bridge, Laura said, to understand his species, to learn how to coexist with them instead of fighting them. We are on their planet, Governor. We are the aliens here. If we start out by killing everything that looks dangerous, we will spend the rest of our lives at war with the native life. Engineer Murphy spoke up. Laura has a point. We cannot fence ourselves off forever. Eventually, we need to expand, to explore, to use the planet's resources. If we can establish peaceful contact with the dominant predators, that makes our job a lot easier. And if we cannot, Jennings challenged. If the creature turns on us? If it leads others of its kind here to attack? That has not happened, Laura said. Blue has been around dozens of people for 2 days. He has not shown aggression to anyone. He has been nervous, yes. Cautious, absolutely, but not aggressive. He only reacts when he perceives a threat to me or himself. Dr. Kent leaned forward. I have a question, Chief Bennett. In your observation, does Blue show signs of distress when separated from you? Laura thought about that. Yes. When Dr. Price tried to examine him alone, he became agitated. He calmed down as soon as I returned. Attachment behavior, Kent said thoughtfully. Similar to how young children react to their parents. That suggests a deep emotional bond, not just training or conditioning. Or dependency, Jennings argued. What happens when you leave, Chief? Or if something happens to you? Does the creature go wild? That is why I am not proposing Blue be the only one of his kind here, Laura said. I am proposing a program. We bring in more cubs, young ones that can be socialized. We study them, learn from them, and teach them to accept humans. In 2 generations, we could have a population of these creatures that see humans as allies, not threats. The room went quiet. Governor Chen looked at each council member in turn, reading their expressions. It is ambitious, Chen said finally, and risky. Everything about being here is risky, Laura replied. We came to this planet knowing almost nothing about it. Every day is a risk, but we can either hide behind our walls and hope nothing breaks through, or we can be smart. We can learn. We can adapt. That is what humans do best, Governor. We survive by making allies, not enemies. Dr. Price nodded enthusiastically. I support Chief Bennett's proposal. The scientific value alone would be enormous. And if we succeed, we gain an incredible advantage. Imagine having these creatures as partners. They are natural hunters, scouts, guards. They know this planet in ways we never could. You are talking about domestication, Jennings said. That takes generations. It took our ancestors about 15,000 years to turn wolves into dogs, Laura said. But they did not have modern science. We have veterinary knowledge, behavioral psychology, genetic understanding. We can accelerate the process. And Blue proves it is possible. He is already domesticated in less than 2 weeks. Governor Chen stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Laura could see colonists going about their daily work, building, planning, surviving. After a long moment, Chen turned back. Motion to allow the creature designated Blue to remain in the colony under Chief Bennett's supervision, Chen said. Regular behavioral assessments will be conducted by Dr. Price. Any sign of aggression or danger, and the situation will be re-evaluated. All in favor? Price raised her hand immediately. Kent raised his after a moment of thought. Murphy raised his. Chen raised hers. That was 4 votes. Jennings sat with his arms crossed, scowling. Kelly, the assistant, looked uncertain but finally raised her hand timidly. 5 votes out of 6. Motion passes, Chen announced. Chief Bennett, Blue is your responsibility. Do not make me regret this. You will not, ma'am, Laura said, feeling relief wash over her. Thank you. All of you. As Laura left the chamber, she felt lighter than she had in days. Blue was safe. They had bought time to prove this could work. Now she just had to make sure she lived up to that promise. Blue was waiting at the door of their unit, pacing anxiously. When Laura walked in, he rushed to her and circled around her legs, chirping and making happy sounds. "We did it, boy," Laura said, kneeling down to hug him. "You get to stay." "We both do." Blue licked her face with a tongue that felt like sandpaper. Laura laughed. It was the first truly happy moment she had experienced since the crash. They had survived, and now they were going to thrive. Part 5. 6 months passed since that council meeting, and the colony was transformed. What started as a desperate survival outpost had grown into a thriving settlement. More buildings, better walls, fields where they were trying to grow earth crops in alien soil, and walking through it all, Laura Bennett with a fully grown Blue at her side. Blue was massive now, nearly 200 kilograms of muscle and fur. His shoulder reached Laura's waist, and when he stood on his back 4 legs, he was taller than her. But despite his size, he was gentle around the colonists. Children ran up to pet him. Adults greeted him by name. He had become a fixture of daily life, as common as the prefab buildings and the smell of cooking food. Laura's role had changed too. She was no longer just a chief engineer. Governor Chen had created a new position for her. Chief of Native Relations. Her job was to study the local wildlife, especially Blue's species, which they had officially named Hexapanthera. She worked with Dr. Price and a growing team of xenobiologists to understand these creatures and find ways to coexist with them. The program Laura had proposed was working better than anyone expected. They had brought in 3 more cubs over the past months. Price had developed a protocol for approaching the young ones. It involved food, patience, and letting the cubs make the first move. 2 of the cubs had bonded with other colonists. The third was still wary but showed progress. But the real breakthrough came from Blue himself. He seemed to understand that these other cubs were important to Laura. He would play with them, teach them, and calm them down when they got scared. It was like watching an older brother with younger siblings. The cubs learned faster with Blue's help than they ever could have from humans alone. Today was special, though. Today they were attempting something new. Laura stood at the edge of the colony's west wall, Blue beside her, watching the forest. Dr. Price and her team were set up with cameras and scanning equipment. Governor Chen and Commander Jennings, who had slowly warmed up to Blue over the months, watched from a safe distance. "Are you sure about this?" Price asked nervously. "No," Laura admitted, "but we have to try. We cannot stay isolated forever. At some point, we need to make contact with the adults." "The wild population? See if we can establish peaceful boundaries." Blue had been acting strange for the past week, more alert, more focused on the forest. He would stand at the wall and make soft calling sounds, not aggressive but not quite friendly either. Laura thought she understood. He was calling to his own kind. Maybe his original pack. Maybe just other Hexapanthera in the area. Yesterday they had gotten a response. Deep rumbling calls from the forest. Multiple voices. A pack of adults was nearby, and they were curious about the strange settlement that had appeared in their territory. "If this goes wrong, we pull back immediately," Jennings said. His hand was on his weapon, but Laura noticed he was not pointing it. "That was progress," agreed, Laura said. Then she looked at Blue. "Ready, boy?" Blue chirped and looked toward the forest. His body language was calm but alert. Not afraid, just focused. Laura opened the small access gate in the wall and stepped through. Blue followed. Price and her team trained their cameras on them. Laura could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. This was either going to be a historic moment of first contact or a terrible mistake. They walked about 50 meters from the wall, to a clearing where the grass was short and visibility was good. Laura sat down on the ground, making herself as non-threatening as possible. Blue sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. They waited. The forest was quiet except for the usual sounds of birds and insects. Minutes passed. Laura started to think maybe the adults had decided not to show. Then she saw movement in the shadows between the trees. One Hexapanthera emerged first. An adult female, slightly smaller than the male that had attacked Laura months ago, but still impressive. Her fur was lighter than Blue's, almost silver in the sunlight. She stopped at the edge of the clearing and stared at them. Blue chirped. Not his usual happy sound, but something else. More formal. Laura recognized it from when he greeted the cubs. It was a greeting. An acknowledgement of pack. The female tilted her head, studying them. Then she chirped back. Same tone, same pattern. Blue stood and took a few steps forward, then stopped and looked back at Laura. The message was clear. Follow me, but slowly. Laura stood carefully and walked with Blue toward the female. Her mouth was dry. This was an adult wild hexapanthera just meters away. One swipe of those paws could kill her instantly. But Blue was calm, so she tried to be calm too. The female watched them approach. When they were about 10 meters away, she made a low rumbling sound. Blue stopped, so Laura stopped. They all stood there for a moment, 3 creatures from different species trying to understand each other. Then something amazing happened. 2 more adults emerged from the forest, followed by 3 cubs. One of the adults was huge, easily the biggest hexapanthera Laura had seen. Probably the pack alpha. The cubs were about Blue's age when Laura first met him, small and curious. The cubs saw Blue and immediately ran toward him, chirping excitedly. Blue responded in kind, and suddenly there was a tangle of young hexapanthera playing in the grass, chasing each other's tails and mock-fighting. Laura could not help but smile. Cubs were cubs no matter what planet they came from. The adults relaxed slightly when they saw the cubs playing with Blue. The big alpha moved forward, stopping right in front of Laura. She forced herself to stay still to keep her breathing steady. This was the moment. This creature could kill her, or it could accept her. Everything depended on what happened next. The alpha leaned forward and sniffed her. Its breath smelled like meat and earth. Its eyes were intelligent and calculating. Laura felt like she was being judged, weighed, measured. She met its gaze without flinching, showing respect but not submission. The alpha made a soft huffing sound. Then it did something Laura never expected. It bumped its massive head against her shoulder, almost knocking her over. Not aggressive, almost affectionate, like when Blue would lean against her. Laura slowly raised her hand and touched the alpha's head. The fur was coarser than Blue's, thicker. The alpha allowed it for a moment, then stepped back. It looked at Blue, then at Laura, then made a series of complex rumbling and chirping sounds. Blue responded with his own sounds, almost like they were having a conversation. Laura wished desperately that she could understand what they were saying. Finally, the alpha turned and walked back toward the forest. The other adults followed. The cubs playing with Blue hesitated, then chirped goodbye and ran after their pack. Blue watched them go, then looked at Laura. He seemed satisfied. Happy even. What just happened? Price's voice crackled over Laura's radio. Did that alpha just accept you? I think so, Laura said, still amazed. I think we just established first contact. Over the following weeks, the pack returned regularly, always stopping at the clearing. Always careful, always watching, but not hostile. They would bring the cubs to play with Blue and the other domesticated hexapanthera. Sometimes they would leave food, fresh kills from their hunts like they were sharing with a neighboring pack. The colonists grew used to seeing wild hexapanthera near the walls. Children would wave at them. The adults would nod respectfully. It became normal, this strange interspecies relationship. Laura documented everything, creating protocols for interaction, rules for respect, boundaries that both species understood. She trained other colonists in reading hexapanthera body language, in knowing when to approach and when to give space. 1 year after the crash, Laura stood on the wall at sunset, Blue beside her as always. The colony had grown again. New ships had arrived with more settlers. They found a thriving community where humans and native predators lived side by side, not as master and pet, but as neighbors. As allies, children born in the colony grew up playing with hexapanthera cubs. They learned to speak the simple language of chirps and rumbles. They had no fear of the native life because they had never been taught to fear it. They just accepted it as normal. Governor Chen came to stand beside Laura. You did something incredible, Chen said quietly. You changed everything. Laura scratched Blue's ears. I just growled at a curious cub. He did the rest. You showed them we could be trusted, that we were not invaders, just another pack trying to survive. That matters more than you know. Blue made his rumbling purr sound content. In the forest beyond the walls, Laura could hear the pack calling to each other. Checking in, saying goodnight. The sounds were familiar now, comfortable. This was home. Laura thought back to that first moment in the forest when she turned and growled at a young predator following her. Such a small choice. Stay or run, fight or flee, respect or fear. That one moment had changed the course of the entire colony. "We came here to build a new world," Laura said. "I guess we did. Just not the way anyone expected," Chen smiled. "The best outcomes rarely are." As the sun set over the alien landscape, painting the purple sky in shades of gold and red, Laura felt something she had not felt since before the crash. Peace. Not just survival, but actual peace. They had found their place on this world, not by conquering it, but by learning to belong to it. Blue leaned against her leg, warm and solid and loyal. The pack called from the forest,